Welcome back to Adventures Through Climate Change with your host, Trevor. And today we are looking at, let me pull this up over here. We are looking at a video that the race for the Arctic is ramping up. Here's why. It's by DW Planet A. Let's just read this real quick, just not even anymore, but the ice in the Arctic is melting, revealing huge amounts of fossil fuels, rare earths, and new shipping routes, and the rush to secure these has already begun. Will countries continue their race for economic and militaristic advantages, or will they finally work together to solve the global problem of climate change? That just sounds super exciting. I mean, I was just like, this is it. This is it, guys. This is what we've been looking for, right? Okay, what am I doing here? Let's just hit that, right? And let us begin.
It's been untouched for millions of years, lying deep below the Arctic ice. The future of our warming planet depends on what we decide to do with it. It could be extremely valuable and extremely dangerous. Below the ice lies a fortune in unexploited oil and natural gas resources. And
True.
Everyone wants a piece of the melting Arctic.
China is geographically
Every country needs it right now, right? You know, the few that are willing to drill and that are drilling and that have the actual oil, they are few and far between anymore, which is the thing. So that's why everybody's looking for the new unexplored areas that nobody has their foothold on that you could exploit. You know, and I just, man, I mean, okay, I just think we should work with what we got at home. So that's me personally, and I do think we should have fossil fuels for the next 50 to 100 years. We should expect to, and we should quit demonizing them. That's my position. Let's go.
near
China
Arctic
is
state.
geographically
United States is
near
an Arctic
the Arctic.
nation.
These restrictions cannot stop us from
So is Australia.
from exploring the Arctic.
And it's not just about oil and gas. The melting ice also opens up shipping routes, fishing grounds, and land.
International waters.
Will the Arctic powers grab those fossil fuels and worsen the heating of our planet?
You wonder what's, you know, they know that there's a lot of it is regular land base, right, under the Arctic, under Antarctica, and you wonder what type of minerals and resources are under that people would want to exploit, or if they already know.
Or will they cooperate for a sustainable future? It's not as simple
Hopefully
as
you'll-
you might think.
Okay, I was hoping you'd tell us.
To survive here, you do need to cooperate.
Correct.
The largest Arctic mission ever, called Mosaic, proved that humans can pull together.
Oh man, I am so impressed. A challenge is a challenge, but we together can overcome it.
Scientists from 20 countries, including
was
Russia,
stacked.
worked peacefully together to investigate climate change in the Arctic. But when it comes to economic interests, that spirit of cooperation evaporates. The regional powers
It is economic. It is also necessary for a lot of these countries. There's a lot of countries that rely on this stuff that are fighting for it because they aren't willing to go on their own land or aren't working out a deal with somebody else or whatever. But that's just the facts. I mean, it is economic, and people are exploiting that too. But mostly, it's governments, right?
are trying to claim as much land as possible. So, who are these rivals?
Denmark.
And who does the Arctic really
over
belong
North
to?
Pole.
More than half of the Arctic coastline is Russian territory. 2 million people live there, about half the population of the entire Arctic region. Then there's the US with Alaska, Greenland, which is part of Denmark, Canada, Iceland, and Norway. International law gives these countries the right to control natural resources in exclusive economic zones up to 200 nautical miles from their coastlines.
Okay.
The Arctic region beyond those boundaries, including the
International.
North Pole, is agreed to be a common heritage of all mankind. That means it should be held in trust for future generations, protected from exploitation by
It's just ice,
nations
right?
or corporations. But
I guess you could drill.
countries can apply for larger exclusive economic zones if they can prove that the shallow sea off their coastline goes out further than 200 kilometers. Norway, Russia, Canada, and Denmark have already done that, presumably for when the melting ice opens up all those economic opportunities. Having a strong presence in the Arctic is ever more important.
The Arctic is caught up in this larger geopolitical tension between NATO and Russia, and it's the Arctic's strategic importance for Russia that also leads to the increased military activity in the north.
I could definitely see
Andreas
that.
Østhagen analyzes the political dynamics of the Arctic region, with an emphasis on security and geopolitics.
We've seen a downward spiral, if you will.
You just know whenever there's opportunity, there's going to be people exploiting it or trying to get their hands on it. It does seem crazy that Russia is always involved in, in everything, and I get it, but because where their land is, but they have the most amount of land, and I get that it's also, Siberia and stuff, very unusable right now. But we are talking about what if there does warm up 6 degrees, 5 degrees. And when I say that, I mean Fahrenheit, Celsius, that'd be insane. That'd be cooking. But those areas up north, I would imagine, would be the more important places to be, right? And they would be ice melt anyways up in the mountains. I mean, it's going to have different landscape. So, I don't know. And we're talking, I think that'd be years down the road, like hundreds of years. And I think we'd have to adapt if that came about. But I think regardless, no matter what happens to the Earth, I think we're going to have to adapt. Let's move on. Just my 2 cents.
Tit for tat, where Russia has been exercising, simulating attacks on Norwegian targets, simulating attacks on NATO targets, and then NATO responds with these large-scale exercises that combines military forces from many countries.
Big shows of military strength often reveal much about potential future conflicts. And surprise, surprise, in the Arctic, it's shaping up to be oil and gas money. Just how much money can be seen in Russia's largest protected wilderness, the Great Arctic Nature Reserve, and the massive oil project there, Vostok Oil. Russia hopes to extract 6 billion tons of crude and 2 trillion cubic meters of gas here. It's planned new airports, marine terminals, and 800 kilometers of pipelines.
Guess you have to.
That's assuming
throw
the
your
Arctic
boat
has
in there
melted enough to
and
ship
let it
out
freeze.
the oil via the Northern Sea route. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has, however, put a dent in these plans. The Vostok project has lost investors and access to Western oil and gas tech and services. It might well be delayed or scaled back. But others are stepping in. One major investor is China.
China is, of course, interested in Arctic science because without this knowledge, it's impossible to operate in the Arctic.
This is Sanna Kopra. She researches China's Arctic policy.
China is very hungry for resources because its economic growth is mainly based on heavy industry, and it needs a lot of energy, a lot of other minerals resources. And the Arctic is a new area where it can exploit these resources. But of course, it's very dependent on cooperation with Arctic states, especially Russia.
But Russia's war against Ukraine has made some in China wary.
Some Chinese investors have paused their activities in Russia because they are fear of sanctions. I mean, of course, China, there are no sanctions against China for now, but if they cooperate very closely with Russia, there is a risk that
they have
the
that,
EU or
that agreement.
the
I
US
think it's
will
12
pose
countries have
sanctions
that
against
agreement.
China as well.
The Arctic is also part of China's ever-expanding Belt and Road Initiative via what's been dubbed the Polar Silk Road. The Belt and Road strategy is building a vast network of railways, highways, and ports to allow China to transport goods and resources around the world. Recently, some Arctic players have slowed or stopped oil and gas development. Canada prohibits offshore oil drilling in marine protected areas, and Greenland banned oil exploration in 2021. The US has suspended oil and gas leases in Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. But pressure is growing to drill here to secure energy supplies. The Arctic's presumed huge gas and oil resources sound so tempting. They're often
I know all that stuff looks ugly, right? I would venture to say, and I know, what are we doing? We're burning the oil, and in the meantime, we're creating CO2 and whatnot. But I would venture to say, if we drilled up all the oil we could and then didn't even break that stuff down, just let it decompose, nature would take over in less than 50 years probably and destroy everything that we set up there. So I don't know landscape wise if that is a big deal. I think that's happened through the earth for thousands of years. Things get taken down, they get broken down, they get, time has its way on all things. Need to keep that, always have that in the back of our minds. So yes, we're burning fossil fuels, but it is big business right now. But there's also not technology wise, there's not another way to go about it when you have billions of people relying on this. And most people's answers are just to, let those people go cold or not afford things. I don't know what their answer is, but that's what happens is in the extreme cold, people die. People die if you don't have the fuel.
Cited as fact. Most numbers refer to one study of the United States Geological Survey, which was conducted in 2009.
It is important to understand that the percentages and estimates that are provided in these reports are really highly uncertain.
This is Nina Döring. She and her team researched how a scientific estimate became economic facts.
The numbers and percentages started to appear in a wide range of policy documents and Arctic strategies of different countries and in newspaper articles. And through all of these translation processes, it really started to seem as if it was a fact that there are large quantities of oil and gas just kind of waiting to be found in the Arctic, when actually that really is much more unclear.
And what?
They don't even know. But I agree. If you do think it's there, you should be fighting for it. If that is what, but I personally, of course I think it's there. I think oil and stuff is the breakdown of organic material. I think it's more plant material than anything. I know they always say it's like bones and carbon-based material and whatnot. I happen to think that there's a lot more foliage around that would, and you see when you break down plants into mulch and stuff, they'll turn into that gooey stuff. And we can create fuel based on corn now and ethanol and whatnot. I think oil, I think that's what that is. And maybe I should research more what they think oil is, but I was always told it was from like bones and dinosaurs. But regardless, if you happen to believe that the earth does go back that far and that there's been a bunch of these cycles, then you have to believe at a certain point when it's been hotter that there has been animals and foliage on that land that's under that ice at one point or another throughout the span of the earth. So I would assume, maybe you shouldn't assume, but I would assume there's going to be some sort of valuable assets down there. And I think most people are having that same thought. Drilling through it might be another thing. I don't know how much permafrost you'd have for how long. I don't even know what that ice or something that is. I guess if you got the drill bits to go through it, and as you get deeper, it's going to warm up anyways. It naturally warms up. So
what about the people living in the Arctic? Their land is not only at the center of geopolitical tensions, it's also melting under their feet.
It's been a real transition for us.
Karen Pletnikov monitors how fishing and climate change are affecting the food chain.
And now the climatic changes, the warm water blob, the harmful algal blooms, they're all conspiring to impact just the basic production of the Bering Sea.
For the 500,000 indigenous people of the Arctic, it's a real threat.
500,000.
Their income, culture, and traditions depend on
closer
an
to
ecologically
50,000.
intact Arctic
Ah,
habitat.
the reindeer.
Toxic substances from
Where's
oil
Santa?
and gas exploitation can collapse such fragile ecosystems. When absorbed by plankton and plants, they can poison the food chain. For example, this little guy is the fattest of the Arctic copepods, and fat is vital to survival in the cold. If those copepods fail to breed, less fat is transported up through the food chain, to fish and birds, to seals, whales, polar bears, and humans. Just tiny amounts of oil in the sea can crash copepod egg hatching
true.
rates. Without copepods, the food chain is seriously disrupted. Between 2013 and 2019, there was a 25% increase in marine traffic in the Arctic.
Apologize. I agree. I think there should be less offshore drilling than there is on land. And I say that because it's a lot easier to clean up an oil spill on land than it is when it dissipates into the ocean. And they're trying to figure out all sorts of things that eat oil and stuff to dump in there. It works to some degree. I mean, they got cleanup pretty good, but not good enough. And that is a major thing. And even me, I mean, I'm an energy guy. I worked in the oil fields for a while. I think that we should mitigate the chance of that type of spread of toxins that we can. And I think going on land is the best option. Just saying.
Arctic. Yet more
And there's a lot of places to still drill, okay?
wastewater discharge, oil pollution, and underwater noise. This disrupts wildlife's ability to communicate, navigate, and hunt, while chemical pollution hurts the health and reproductive abilities of this fragile ecosystem. Most ships use heavy fuel oil, banned in the Antarctic, but somehow allowed in the Arctic. When this ridiculously dirty fuel spills in polar waters, it's especially damaging. When cold, oil is more viscous and doesn't break up into small droplets, which oil-degrading bacteria could consume.
The risk of oil spills and accidents can be a really serious challenge for cleanup here.
Developing the Arctic sustainably alongside indigenous groups is key to Eleanor Tracy's work.
Because when an oil spill happens, these areas are hard to access. So cleanup operations are usually delayed. Accidents can ruin ecosystems, wipe out the large populations of species, and of course damage the livelihood.
Heavy fuel oil creates another problem, not only in the Arctic, but over the entire world. It's black carbon, which is produced by burning fossil fuels, especially heavy fuel oil in ships. Black carbon particles are not only a direct health risk. In places like the Arctic, they blanket the white snow and ice and make them absorb the sun's heat instead of reflecting it. So the snow and ice melt faster. So what to do? There are many committed groups, local, national and international NGOs who are promoting sustainable cooperation in the Arctic. Then there's the Arctic Council, the leading body for cooperation and coordination among the Arctic states and indigenous peoples. The Arctic Council promotes sustainable development and environmental protection in the region by providing assessments and clear recommendations on action to be carried out by the Arctic states. But they are only recommendations. It's up to each state which action is taken. For example, the Council suggests defining shipping routes to minimize negative impacts on coastal communities and the marine environment.
I think that's a good idea.
It says black carbon pollution can be reduced by moving away from fossil fuel-powered transportation on sea and land.
What do you suggest?
It wants to connect existing marine protection areas and establish new ones in close cooperation with indigenous peoples.
Going back to the 1500s?
Russia's war on Ukraine has disrupted the Council's work. But other Arctic states and communities are working together, without Russia. One successful example of international cooperation was the Central Arctic Ocean Fishing Moratorium, signed in 2021 by the US, Russia, China, the EU and several more countries. This multilateral agreement takes a legally binding, precautionary approach to protect an area from commercial fishing, before such fishing has even begun. But there's no sign yet of a similar law to protect the Arctic from oil and gas drilling.
I think the superseding issue in all development decisions, should it be in the Arctic for new coal-fired plants, for extracting oil and gas out of the ground, should be climate change.
This is Malte Humpert, founder of the US think tank, the Arctic Institute.
And one way to address that should be some kind of global fund where projects like that could be offset, where it's like, hey, Russia, how about not extracting oil and gas resources out of the ground? And there will be some kind of compensation fund that every country in the world will pay into, depending on some complicated formula.
While countries hesitate.
This is why globalists don't make any sense. As soon as you get to solutions, you'll just make every country in the world pay their fair share. Okay, you in parts of Australia and Africa and South America and even parts of North America, you in the tribes, you have to pay for climate change, and we will fund it all. Don't worry. We will look after your money. Okay, we will look after your money. We'll make sure it's spent in the best way possible. After all, we know what's better for your money anyways. We're going to need your funds, and, we'll take care of this. All right, now. That's a beautiful dream. That's a beautiful dream you had there, bud. Realistically, that's not going to happen. And it does happen constantly, but it's not going to happen the way, because we give so much money already to that type of stuff. It's going to come down to, you're saying that that we need to pay Russia to not pollute up there. Every country in the world will compensate them, so they don't even need to compensate themselves. Through some crazy math you said or something like that, okay.
To join forces, some major businesses are already moving away from oil and gas. A growing number of reinsurers, among them Aviva, Allianz and Munich Re, have committed to stop or restrict underwriting for new oil and gas projects. It takes an average of 16 years before new oil and gas fields reach maximum production. So putting money into Arctic oil and gas projects is becoming more of a gamble for banks too, as in the near future, renewable energy may well be much more profitable. But only a binding multilateral treaty can protect.
That's what I'm talking about. Demonizing the oil industry and the means of energy production that we have currently right now, making it speculative, that banks are to the point they don't even want to invest in it. And this is affecting billions of people across the globe, billions of people that need fossil fuels, they need coal. So I get that we need to make certain adjustments, and I got solar panels. I've tried to do what I can, but the thing is, even with solar panels, you're just contributing to the grid, and there's no way for real storage. It's cloudy out right now. I bet you if I pull up my my device that shows me how much input is actually being put in, it's probably only about 30% based on the clouds, maybe even less, 20% of what I should be getting for energy. That's what happens. It's unreliable. I can't predict if there's going to be clouds outside. I can't predict if the wind's going to be blowing. I can predict that petroleum products, that oil can burn and create fuel. I can predict that. So I just think I think that people need to relook at how they're talking about this and quit demonizing it, because nobody wants to reinvest in something. And then what happens is it gets squeezed at the bottom, and who gets left out, right? You got billions of people that are going to be freezing cold as everybody keeps saying. This climate change is going to get warmer till it gets to the point of being an ice age. So let's carry on.
The Arctic. And in the end, cooperation is the key.
Cooperation. I was thinking
If you're interested in topics like these, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We have a new video out every Friday.
Okay, what did I think? What did I think? I thought that the whole video was pretty good. I thought it was very interesting to know that type of situation that we're in, where a bunch of countries are fighting over the possibility, the opportunity that current land that isn't divided up would go. I don't know how that would work, how things are going to play out as far as China fighting for that and Russia and everything. I don't like when you get to the end and people have unrealistic solutions, and they throw out these solutions and people buy into them because they're emotional, and they're like, that is a good idea. Governments should pay. But the thing is, it's not governments that pay, and the governments can write as many checks as they want, because like the US government, all they have to do is print more money. So they do this false thing where they're writing a budget that they don't even stick to. They don't even stick to the budget. They spend more than that every single year. And then they're just like, oh, well, and they're like, we won't raise your taxes. We won't raise your taxes. It's no problem, right? It's no problem. And so they don't raise our taxes that year. And we're like, yay, thank you so much. But what they do, inflation was already 3.9% on a good year. You know, when Trump was in office, there was a few times where it was 2.1%. Pretty incredible. Inflation was like that, because that's printing money. That's all that is inflation is printing money. And so even at 3.9%, you're losing it every single year. If you put it in a savings account, if you put it in CDs or bonds or anything, you're getting 1 or 2% return. The government's laughing at you. They're like, we're giving you 1 or 2% return when inflation on an average is at 3%, and right now is like 7.5 to 8%, which is insane. And that's based on the previous year, which we've had a couple consecutive years of quite a bit of growth. So overall, from what we were 3 years ago, like in the last 3 years, the amount of growth that we've had, based on the growth that we had the 3 years prior to that, insane. If you look at that type of inflation, that's the type of inflation we should be looking at, because they look at it on like this little tiny scale, and it's all messed up anyways. I digress. I just don't think that throwing money and having the government in charge of this type of stuff is a good idea, or I mean, a solution at all. Do we need to figure out what's going on with the Arctic? Absolutely. Who has control? What's happening with that? And I guess it needs to be a fight. But I just quit demonizing fossil fuels. Now, with that being said, let me know what you guys think. Obviously, this is just we're a few videos into this. I have a lot of education to do. We're just armchairing it right now, and I'm learning a lot. I hope you're learning a lot, and I'd love to hear your comments. Shoot me some videos if you think I should watch something, and break it down into my crazy thought process, which, you know, is slightly less empathetic than it probably should be, I will admit. So I hope to catch you on the next video. Thank you so much.